This is about people who are for making a difference to save us and people who are against it and prefer money. So, Senator Rubio, can you tell me right now that you will not accept a single donation from the NRA in the future?
The stars at night, I thought one day they'd show me the way.
Shouldn't have a law that makes it harder. It just means understand, to be honest. It isn't going to stop this from happening.
Nothing inspires more confidence than a lawmaker who doesn't believe in the power of laws. Yeah, it's like your pastor saying, hey man, I would pray for your cancer, but I mean, who knows if this shit really works?
Hello humans, welcome back to the Slackline Quote of the Day broadcast. You are here with the boss.
The boss is coming!
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you
And we are once again chatting quotes. Missed yesterday due to me not having time. But we are back today, sifting through some news, digging for some interesting things that some people have said. There was a rally in Sunrise, Florida, or more of a meeting and a questioning for Senator Marco Rubio and some other people from the people around Sunrise, and which is near where the Parkland shooting was. And there was some pretty devastating comments directed at the senator and his colleagues in Washington about their inaction about the gun issues and their pointless and empty rhetoric and all that type of stuff. And you heard a couple of those clips there at the beginning. And so our quote comes from those meetings. And Jerry, if you don't mind, who is bringing us our quote today? That quote brought to us today by Shameface. Been disgraced by embarrassing comments you personally don't find embarrassing for some reason? Try Shameface. That is a prosthetic face that will fit directly over your own and convey a sense of shame to those around you, even though you may not feel it yourself. And they are bringing us our quote today from Fred Guttenberg, who is a father of a young girl who was shot and killed at the Parkland shooting. He stood up and spoke to Marco Rubio, and he said this: "Your comments this week and those of our president have been pathetically weak." That is from Fred Guttenberg, again a father of a young girl who was shot at the school in Florida just a couple days ago. And if you haven't seen the video, you should. Seen the meeting, you should check it out. He said this to a standing ovation from at least a few thousand people, whoever was there. And Rubio kind of had to just stand there and take it. And you know what? He did pretty well, I have to say, for the little snippet that I saw. Anyways, he did. He took that that jeering and whatnot decently and responded respectfully to the people's questions, even when they were viscerally booing him, and rightfully so in a lot of places. It was interesting, you know. There was another quote there where Marco Rubio said, I'm sure you saw it on all the other, on all the comedy channels and whatnot, that you would literally have to ban every semi-automatic rifle that's sold in America. And the crowd in Florida cheered, like loudly, thunderously. And he just went, okay, I get it. And he seemed to actually absorb it, and I hope he absorbed it. And I think that it was an interesting sort of moment for me, anyways, to see that and kind of feel over the last few days that maybe there is actual change happening. That maybe kind of like the hashtag Me Too movement that happened, and is still happening. That there's going to be kind of a very quick and swift backlash, I guess, to some injustice that's happening, and to people in Washington not listening to the people that are employing them essentially and voting for them and whatnot. And I think that that Rubio was genuinely taken by surprise at the reaction from the crowd, but maybe not. I mean, it was a room or a crowd full of people that had just gone through something traumatic. But I mean, this is Florida. I mean, these people. This is where people love their guns, and this is where this type of stuff unfortunately tends to happen. But there are all sorts of positive signs for me for potential gun control changes happening, and I wonder what that actually means. Rubio made an interesting point when he was questioned about the assault ban, the assault rifle ban that they struck down, and he mentioned how he struck it down because it would still keep some rifles that are essentially the same weapon legal, and the only reason is that it has like a plastic grip. I mean, the solution is obviously to that. Like, the solution to me is that to just ban them all, as everybody else seemed to agree with down there who was at that meeting. But yeah, I was pretty impressed by the fortitude of this man to speak so eloquently, especially only a few days after his daughter was killed, without even like a tear in his eye or anything like that, like stare Rubio straight in the face and tell him like it is. I really I think that's the type of thing that that has really been getting people disconnected from the politicians and those types of things, that has left politicians for the most part with maybe the wrong ideas about what people want, or getting too caught up in serving non-people interests, corporate interests, and lobby interests and that type of thing. And maybe getting a bit of a reality check on the fact that they're supposed to be making legislation for people and making decisions for people that have voted them in, and not for those other organizations that have been funding their campaigns. And I mean, that's the biggest issue there, is obviously the money in politics, but it's kind of a question for a different day. So I kind of thought about what it would mean to have actual legislative gun control happening, and what would happen. I mean, like, I've actually I've written a bit about this before, in a very extreme way, in a fictional sci-fi story, and it all goes to shit when people try to take their guns and there's buybacks and violence and riots, and the U.S. descends into a second civil war. That's my dystopian, cynical view of the whole thing. But realistically, I mean, what are we looking at as far as fixing this thing, or as far as actually banning assault rifles and weapons that people already have en masse? There would be obvious backlash. So what does that mean? There are going to be people that don't want to turn over those guns. A lot of people. How does that work? So you do a voluntary buyback. And then you, like, at a certain point you're going to have to seize them. Do certain people get grandfathered? Like, that would make no sense, right? Yeah, I mean, even for me, somebody who's very pro gun control, especially considering the state of the U.S., there are a lot of factors that I think are, really difficult questions that you have to ponder. Like, if you're talking like voluntary buybacks and seizures, like, there's inevitable violence and inevitable riots, and how are you equipped to deal with that? You're talking about probably, like, National Guard and army deployment and stuff, and it would look pretty fascist all the way around. So yeah, I mean, it would be tough, I think, for the good people of the U.S. to go for something like that. I mean, it would honestly be kind of tough for anybody to go through something like that. It'd be tough for me to watch something like that. As good as I think it would be, you're still looking at a very significant government intervention in people's lives all at once about this one specific thing. And I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but I'm just kind of curious about what the actual outcomes of it would be. I mean, like, first obvious steps are to up the background checks and not allowing mentally ill people to have them and ex-cons to have them and those types of things, and maybe putting like a limit on how many people can own. And yeah, on the type, for sure, on the type. I don't see that as I don't see those things as incredibly invasive. I think what will end up being invasive is how do we get the guns that already exist back from people, and how do those not get sold into the black market instead, and how many get pushed into bordering nations, a la we're in Canada, and it's a long border that's not exactly secure, especially in the prairie areas and stuff. Where do all these weapons go? They still exist. They get melted down. Yeah, the ones that actually get turned in, but again, how many won't or wouldn't? And where would they go, and who ends up with them, are kind of interesting and scary thoughts. But again, I want to take it back to the people that are down there, in the wake of this tragedy, that are actually fighting for other people, that are taking time away from grieving their young children and their loved ones, to actually begin to fight for something larger and for something they feel is important for the future, and maybe they didn't before and now they do, and that's okay. I mean, they've gone through something traumatic. I mean, you're allowed to change your mind, you're allowed to change your view, especially when you've faced a great injustice. And again, I had Emma Gonzalez as one of my quotes earlier in the week, and there were a lot of kids that said a lot of things, and I still could probably use some few quotes from some of those kids, and maybe I will tomorrow or going forward. Like, hopefully this continues to go. I mean, they rejected that bill in Florida to ban assault rifles, and there are a lot of kids upset. They're organizing a march on Washington, and there's a lot of people saying that I saw a guy said that 17-year-olds can't organize themselves into a march. He's like, oh, they must have help from the Democratic Party or something. Like, man, like these people are 1 year away from fighting for your country. Fuck you. Like the total lack of awareness of some people is astounding. They wouldn't realize that most people over 15 years old are probably smarter than half the people that are in Congress. Like, have you talked to a 15-year-old kid lately? Fuck, man. Most of them are way beyond where any of us were at that age, and it's because we can absorb information now so fast. Sometimes that information isn't great, but when it is good, and when people have something to rally around, it can be very powerful. And I hope that these kids continue to use their voices and their ability to spread their voices and spread their message to spark some real change. And people always say that after Sandy Hook and all those like elementary kids got shot and no change was made, that was a signal that no change would ever be made. But those kids were too young to speak for themselves, and the kids that we're hearing from now from this school aren't, and they're not afraid to speak their minds, and I think it's great. And obviously their parents as well, because that was the quote I used today. So maybe we'll end it there. That quote is from Fred Guttenberg, father of a girl who was killed at the school in Florida. Your comments this week and those of our president have been pathetically weak. That is Fred Guttenberg to Marco Rubio and other lawmakers at a meeting in Florida. And that quote again brought to us by Shameface. Been disgraced by embarrassing comments you personally don't find embarrassing for some reason. Try a Shameface, a prosthetic face that will fit right to your skin and will convey an emotion of shame that you seem to not be able to feel. That is it for the Slackline quote of the day. Thank you to Crooked Spies again for their tunes. Make sure you're following Slackline on Instagram at the.slack.line and on Twitter at slackline_radio and on iTunes and YouTube at Slackline Podcast. You have been listening to The Boss.
The boss is coming!
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you
That's been the quote of the day. Thanks for paying attention, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye for now.
Hey, mama, I know what you need, but I never met a woman with so much green. Hey, mama. Hey, mama, hey. Hey, mama, I've seen you around, messing with all the poor boys in this town. Hey, mama. Hey, mama, hey. You burn this whole place down just to wear the crown.